Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics Football. It's Fran here, and I'll be looking at my Gameweek 8 team selection with you guys right after a very lovely international break. Now, of course, across the international break, we actually saw a lot of news, a lot of great games as well in terms of international games, but I'm sure we all missed the Premier League. Not much has really changed in terms of our estimations of players, but I think quite a few updates have been made in terms of injuries and also kind of, maybe like fixture congestion in terms of players who are returning from South American fixtures and whether they're actually able to play or not. We also have actually been dealt with the most latest injury news, which is actually Son's kind of COVID confirmation. And that, of course, is going to have a big impact in terms of wildcarders, but also players who are probably looking for a kind of three-man punt, with Son in the team. And of course, Son was a player that I was actually looking at to pick up back to my team just due to the fact that he's picked up so much form and is actually continuing to play well whilst Tottenham have been mostly playing poor, as an overall side. But just before I actually head into the video and actually explain my team selection, I'd love to shout out OneFootball. We've been working with them for several videos now, and as you can tell, they're actually the best football app, for a football fan. I would actually use the app for all sorts of news. You can kind of get estimations of what managers have said in terms of players, such as the availability of someone like Rudiger, who's clearly going to be missing the next kind of game for versus Brentford. Meanwhile, someone like Lukaku's coming in. You'll also find statistical analysis of players, their performance in specific games, and also predictive analysis on what they are expected to do in a future game in any sort of tournament. You'll also get coverage of continental leagues such as the Champions League, the Europa League, or even this year's new Conference League. The international fixtures are also covered. So, of course, as the World Cup looms and other kind of World Cup qualifiers come in to play, you'll be able to follow that down to a T. So please check the link in the description below. It actually works for both Android and iPhone users. Now let's go back into our team selection. And of course, I think as I said, the big kind of move that I've made this week is going to be going for Foden. And I've moved actually away from Sarr. And a lot of people are going to question, why have I gone away from Sarr at this point in time? And I think, a lot of people have been looking at Watford's fixtures and justifiably saying, that they've been very poor. And that's true. And with the kind of change in manager, I don't really expect much to change. I think, Watford have a little bit of a personnel issue where, simply put, the depth of the Premier League is incredibly strong. And I just think Watford as a quality in terms of as a quality side just aren't there. The midfield is pretty uncreative at this point in time, and the defense, I think, kind of follows in suit. And we've seen that Sarr tries to be as direct as a player as possible, but he really does it pretty much out of desperation. And whilst it kind of works, versus some of the weaker opposition in terms of teams who actually allow you to exploit spaces and actually more gaps, there's just going to be less space for him to run in behind. There's also going to be less chances being created versus top teams and top defenses. And it's going to be kind of a repeat of games like the Tottenham game, for example, where Watford are unable to actually really create chances. Now, of course, Ranieri can maybe work his magic with his side. As we've seen in his managerial stints, he can have the highs of highs in terms of, going for a Premier League title run with Leicester. But we've also seen the lows, during his managerial stints. And I do really think that this Watford stint might actually be one of them, just due to the fact that there just isn't enough quality in the side to actually maintain, a Premier League kind of standing, unfortunately. When we actually look at the transfer, as I said, the one fixture that actually really makes sense to capitalize on this week is going to be Man City versus Burnley, especially with Rafinha probably not going to be able to make it to the game versus Southampton on time, or at least be fit for it. I don't think Leeds are going to really risk him, and I think the kind of FPL scouts all around the world have been kind of tracking his journeys and his travels, and I don't really think he's going to make it to the Southampton game and be a kind of quintessential factor to that game. And with Bamford being out as well, this actually calls for a fantastic week for Southampton to potentially get a clean sheet once again, and it could be versus Leeds, which is why Livramento has actually joined my side at this point in time, and why Foden, conversely, is now in my team to actually be someone that I would like to capitalize on. Now, Foden, of course, is someone who is definitely rotatable. I think it's inarguable. If you're a Man City player and you're not named Kevin De Bruyne and you're not, and you're fit, you still might be called to the bench, and that's pretty much how it goes for the team. But you take that risk because it's worth it. If you think that the player can call. And I think as we've seen in previous weeks, we've seen someone like Jesus, who we thought was somewhat rotatable, have fantastic amount of output as well as a player in the forward position. I think Foden can follow in suit in a sense in the midfield. We've seen Grealish actually be the more nailed-on player in my opinion, due to the fact that he wasn't injured at the start of the season. But Foden definitely seems to be the more direct piece, and I think someone who's actually worth it if you actually have enough coverage in terms of the bench. And I think as time goes on and I move away from someone like Jota in the near future, I will have the capacity to do that, especially since I probably will also move someone like Benrahma into an enabler and maybe downgrade my forward line over the coming weeks, right? And that's pretty much my plan in the near future. In terms of defense, I don't really have any immediate plans other than the fact that I want to try and trim down my Chelsea defense. I did mention that I wanted to go for a back four, but I think just due to the fact that Christensen is so rotatable, he clearly hasn't proven to be the asset that I really wanted him to be. And, that's unfortunate, but it's nice that I still have him at least in this game where Rudiger is potentially out, and a lot of people only have Rudiger as their Chelsea defender. So that is a little bit of a plus this week, but I hope that Rudiger's injury is a little bit more of a short-term one, which means that I can actually fully move Christensen into Cancelo, somewhat into the near future. There is, of course, the option of going for Diaz if I want to play it slightly safer, and that might be something that I would like to do, especially since I still have Cody in my bench. But I'll have to think about that. Livramento still is a fantastic option for me, and he's extremely appealing because it didn't make sense for me to ever go for a Brighton double up, right? Given the fact that I used my wildcard early and the option of Ramsdale wasn't really present at that moment in time. In terms of my midfield, of course, Salah and Benrahma have been kind of permanent fixtures for a long, long time now. And that's totally fine, right? I'm happy to have Salah on my team. He's a fantastic player, probably the best player in any week. I've pretty much not captained him, has been a mistake. With Benrahma, I do think his run of fixtures is kind of drying up in terms of how good they are. I also have that West Ham double up, which still seems to be something that I have right now, and arguably something that I probably want to move away from, right? When we actually look at how tasty the Brentford fixtures are, I think the kind of natural comparison as a partnership is going to be Mbeumo and Toney. Now, of course, Mbeumo is actually the midfielder playing a little bit more advanced, and Toney is actually playing a little bit more of an assistive and kind of maybe even creative role for the team, but also equally as talismanic, in my opinion, as someone like Antonio, who has been the pretty much out-and-out goal scorer for West Ham. I just think that I'll probably move into a structure where, let's say, Benrahma gets moved into someone like Mbeumo in the near future. Maybe I keep Antonio for a while longer, and maybe conversely, say Maximin is moved into someone like Toney or a Wolves player in either Jimenez or Hwang in the near future. So that's pretty much how I see things right now. The plan, of course, for the next week is going to be to move away from Ronaldo. With the Liverpool fixture looming, and just the fact that you have the opportunity to really captain Lukaku, who seems to be an essential captain versus Norwich in Game Week 9, I just think it's a no-brainer. And it might even be a week where I actually decide to take up a little bit of a hit just to actually accommodate for that fact, and maybe also include Rafinha in my team. If I'd like, if I'm feeling a little bit of FOMO as well. But that's pretty much how things stand right now with my team. I'd love to actually look into getting more midfielders and kind of changing the core of my team. I think I'm just still stick for a 3-4-3 right now, just due to the fact that I think I have been a little bit dismayed with the fact that the Chelsea defense hasn't been as interesting as I anticipated due to the impact on Christensen. And even though Rudiger is potentially out for a while, I think the issue, of course, is once again making the right decision between Chilwell, James, and Alonso is incredibly tough. And I'd rather that person be Cancelo in my team, right? So if it ever moves to a situation where I go for a back four, I think I'm probably going to go for a Man City double up, if anything. But that's how things stand. Ultimately, though, I think when you capitalize and try to think about, trying to get points and maximize that game versus Burnley, it probably makes more sense to still go for a midfielder. Yes, my bench is extremely thin this week, but I think in terms of FPL, you also have to look at trying to maximize your amount of points per week, and a fixture versus Burnley, which is almost like a 50% chance of being a 5-0 on a year-to-year basis. You have to kind of take that, and that's why I'm going for Foden this week. I hope you guys have a wonderful game week ahead, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon.